Just about to go live.
Yep, live.
Afternoon, everybody. Good to see you. My name's Councillor Mary Vallely. I'm your chair for today. I'd like to draw your attention to the following housekeeping rules. If you hear continuous fire alarm, please evacuate the room, obviously. Go to the public gallery by the stairwells. Do not use the lifts, and please assemble at Queen Victoria's statue in front of the civic offices. Not Charles Dickens, as I thought it was. In order to comply with the fire marshal regulations, if you signed in the Guildhall, please remember to sign out when you leave the building after today's meeting. So we're live web streaming today, so hello guests, all one. I draw your attention to the fact that this meeting will be live streamed. Members of the public will also be permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. Is that anybody here? No? Okay. Please be advised that the public seating area is not in full view of the camera used to webcast this meeting. Please can I ask members and officers to introduce themselves, starting with you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. I'm Councillor Hannah Brent for Drayton and Farlington.
That wasn't me. I'm Councillor Simon Bosher, Drayton and Farlington Ward.
Councillor Raymond Dent, Copner Ward.
Councillor Ian Holder, St Thomas Ward.
Councillor Abdul-Qadir, Baffins Ward.
Councillor Brian Madgwick, Paulsgrove Ward.
Councillor Graham Heaney, St Jude Ward.
And I'm James Harris, the Senior Local Democracy Officer.
Any declarations of interest today? None? Pleased you made it, Brian.
Sorry about all that.
That's all right, you got here, that's the main thing.
3 o'clock train and it came at 25 to 4.
I heard.
25 to 5.
Minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of February. Has everybody read the minutes from last time? In fact, is anybody here that was here last time? You and I were, Graham. Anything people want to bring up? Is it a correct record? Yes? Yep.
Have you got a copy of the...
On the way in. So I'm going to second Graham to say it's a correct record because it's only you and I here, I think. Yep. I can approve it, yes, thank you very much. Brilliant. So the Scrutiny Work Programme, have you all had a chance to look at it? We've received a report which provides an update of the work on the panels. And we ask you to consider the suggestions from the theme panels for topics to be included in the Scrutiny Work Programme at Appendix 1 of the report. Everybody had a look? The theme panel chairs have been invited to attend this meeting in order to provide further detail on the topics and to answer any questions that you may have. When adding topics to the work programme, can I draw your attention to the flow chart at the very back, Appendix 2. This is designed to ensure that topics scrutinised are of the most value, achievable, and that the formal scrutiny process is the best vehicle for the aims to be achieved. I think we probably used that last year as well, yeah?
We did, Chair. That's been agreed for a couple of years.
Couple of years, good. In addition to those published, I understand that the EDCL scrutiny panel wish to put forward the following topics. Do we want to do these first, or we want to go into the actual report?
I think probably if we mention the EDCL ones just for completeness, then
Okay.
members have got all of the topics
Yeah.
before them.
Okay. So, culture and literacy, engagement with deprived communities. The reasons for the suggestion is that evidence from the Summer Reading Challenge 2023 showed lower results from deprived communities, and obviously this is worrying. The panel will consider what actions can be taken by library and museum services to increase take-up in cultural activity by deprived or underrepresented communities. Any thoughts? underrepresented usually means people who aren't in the majority. So if we have small community groups, possibly BM groups, yeah,
Particularly deprived communities.
yeah, like Charles Dickens, for example, which is really a big area too, but it's actually low down on the attainment list. So, any thoughts on that?
Give out any outlines as to how they're going to achieve that.
Does it say in here already?
So it's just,
There's not really a lot of information in this at all. No, there's no further detail. And we haven't got anybody here to tell us any different to that. What do we suggest?
then I believe they'll be receiving a report at the meeting detailing the facts, and they can probably start with a sort of question challenge session type meeting, and I guess if there's anything really that arises from that, they could take it a bit deeper, but if not, they should be able to form some recommendations based upon evidence provided in the report.
So I was actually at the meeting the other day, and I specifically asked, we need information on this. We need to know if anything's better or worse and how, because there are some bits that they took from the reading challenge that actually improved on last year, but we need to know how they're going to do this so we can bring that back and look at the next report.
Councillor Kadir, Chair.
Councillor Kadir?
Yeah, can I just clarify are we talking about the reading targets that Councillor Russell Simpson was chairing? I was there, was in the meeting, so I don't know.
Yep.
Oh,
we talked about some ideas that are coming to ideas, and there were other officers involved. So do you not think that we should wait for that report to see how far that gone, rather than we are giving more thought about it?
Councillor Bolsher?
I'll just make a general comment. This is the panel that's approving these work streams at this meeting, and yet we're being asked to wait for reports. I mean, perhaps I'll touch on a couple of other things. I mean, I've read through this, and the one that's the Education, Children and Young People Scrutiny Panel, to me, bang on. That ticks every single box I'm actually looking for. We've got nothing here from EDCL apart from this is what we'd like to do, no method behind it, no completion date, and let's wait for the report. You look at the Housing and Social Care Scrutiny Panel, that's looking at asbestos, but that's looking to complete next month. What are they going to do for the rest of the year? Do you see where I'm coming from?
Yeah,
and then and I appreciate we've got Brian here, but there isn't any stuff here that we could have read in advance either. I mean, quite frankly, it's a little bit thin, if I'm honest, and that's not a function. I'm not looking at democratic services here, or whatever, but we're being asked to approve a work stream for these committees, and we haven't got the opportunity to either see in detail what they're actually planning to do, or actually have the opportunity to cross-question, or appreciate Brian's here and Hannah's here, what the chairman should be here representing. After all, they're the ones who get paid the extra money to do this. They should be sat here telling us. All I can do is write culture and literature.
Brian's just got here. He's got some information to the signs of it.
Yeah, which is what I've just acknowledged. But we're looking at this one, EDCL. I've only managed to scribble down culture and literature from deprived communities. That doesn't tell me what it does.
I think we knew that already. Anyway, yeah. Okay, so we'll send them back and ask for more information. But
the trouble is, Chairman, to do that, we've got to come back to this committee to approve it. So we're going to have a special meeting at some point to approve something that hasn't actually been done in the first place. People knew this from May.
Yes, they've had an informal meeting, which was last Thursday, and this is what's arising from that meeting.
Graham?
Can I ask a question? Has the general election prevented panels from meeting? I mean, I know people have been busy in elections, but I mean, has it actually physically prevented the panels from meeting to consider potential topics? Because I know we have this issue about what we can and can't do during election periods, and I just wanted to clarify whether that is specifically something that couldn't happen or whether it's just not happened because people hadn't organised it.
The panels haven't met formally, they have met informally in order to come up with some ideas to put to the SNP for us to formally agree.
Mary, apologies for being late, but this is the first time I've done scrutiny in my 20-odd years here. But the informal meetings we've had have been different. Some are more informal than others. Some of them have written agendas and published, and some of them don't. But I think the only month we've met for informal meetings is July. So there's the 6 weeks of June and the second half of May where people could have met. I don't know if per the rules said we shouldn't meet during that period or not. Other people than me will know that better. But in terms of the future, maybe we need to have things structured. One of the things I did with planning is to try to make sure that we had meetings scheduled really quickly after the election, so because of the planning backlog, so that we didn't wait, as we did last year, for almost 2 months to have a planning meeting. And maybe we need to be better at scheduling things in advance. And I think the reason given is that we don't know what the chair is going to think. But actually, if you've got dates in the diary, you can change them. But let's get dates in the diary. And again, I've never been on this committee before, and other people will have been in here for years. Are we actually ever going to say no to any of these committees looking at any of these things? Have we? Oh, okay. All right. Because anything I looked at EECL, and Russell had a list of 5 things that we were going to look at over the next couple of months. Nothing seemed remarkably controversial. Do we need to formally meet, or could we agree things by email between ourselves? James will advise. James is
I was going to say, this is a public meeting, it's being live streamed to formally agree the works programme. Therefore, we have to follow that precedent. We can't informally, is that me? I think it's my Siri just kicked off, sorry. We can't informally agree something. Now, some committees, and I've chaired scrutiny panels as well as scrutiny management in the past, some will hold a formal meeting, which is perhaps members' apologies, decide the works programme is the agenda, and that's the way it just tends to, what the works programme is that they're going to submit. Others will do it informally, but whichever way you look at it, there is something that always comes, or should always come, to this committee so that we can do it. If it didn't require a formal public sign-off, then we wouldn't be sitting here in the first place. We'd just be nodding it through on email.
That sounds sensible, but in which case do we need to, when this happens again next year, to make sure that if there are chairs of the committees who are not on this panel, on this committee, that they are formally invited to come?
They always are.
Are they? And they just haven't turned up?
Yes. That's why Brian's here.
Brian is here because he's a very valued member of the community.
Brian took 2 hours to get here.
It's a long way from Port Solent, isn't it?
That was kind of... Yes, I did. Thank you, Chair. 2 things immediately on what Gerald said. We did have one in June. Yeah, but you couldn't make it for your obvious reasons, Gerald. Equally, it was very badly turned out. So we did do the meeting, but I then asked Jane to arrange a meeting just with the panel. because the panel's got to come to these things, otherwise you're wasting your time doing it, as you know from last year, our experiences last year. No, so we did do one in June and we done one in July. But now I wasn't told that I had to send you something in advance. I've got it all here, but I wasn't told that I had to send you something in advance. Now, whether that's miscommunication somewhere or other or whatever, but I didn't, you know, I thought I had to come here and explain what we're going to do. And that's why I'm glad Gerald's turned up, as to be truthful, because he was quite involved in this. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, I never get used to this. We need to be a bit more on the ball for this time next year. Let's carry on to the next bit about from EDCL. Empty PCC commercial properties. An audit report has shown that there are a number of PCC buildings which have been empty for a long time. The panel will receive a report from property team within the next 6 months to learn how many properties the council has, how many are vacant, how long they've been vacant for, and how much rental income has potentially been lost. The panel to consider the effectiveness of the advertising of these properties and potential next steps. So the panel, as in the panel EDCL, not us, do any of the panel chairs or representatives in the panels present wish to speak to add to this report or suggest any other topics for inclusion within the work programme?
So I think we've tried to widen it a bit from those because there are lots of different departments that hold property. I think the point, I think, from Russell was about stuff that could be shops.
Yeah.
And quite a lot of the shops are held within the housing department. And so I've tried to suggest that we widen it to all bits of the council, but also not to look to see if things are empty, what that bit of the council has produced in terms of rental income, because we get in something like 30 million a year in rental income, and how that compares with the private sector, because there's no point in us saying, oh, it's terrible, they're empty shops, etc. When actually in the private sector there are lots of empty shops, and I don't know how well we're doing, but to compare, because us saying, oh, we want to make sure that every shop is filled.
But the downturns, not exactly.
When 20% of shops across the country are empty, may not be realistic. So hopefully it'll work. And Tom Southall was very happy to do that, and thought it was a useful exercise to be done.
Just going back to the culture and literacy bit, have you got anything to add to this, Gerald?
Can you read out what it said?
It says the reason for this culture and literacy, engagement with deprived communities. The reason for the suggestion is that evidence from the Summer Reading Challenge 2023 showed lower results in deprived communities. The panel will consider what actions can be taken by library and museum services to increase take-up in cultural activity by deprived/underrepresented communities.
So, if you look at deprivation indices for the city, there's a fairly clear east-west breakup. Lots of people try to talk about north-south divide. For deprivation, it's effectively east-west. And I think what Russell wants to do is to look to see what facilities there are, how it's used, etc. I think...
Is this a mapping exercise or a...
No, I think, I don't know, probably it is a mapping exercise. And I think those of us who represent wards on the east of the island will feel the lack of facilities probably more than anybody else. There's no library in Drayton. There's no youth. All the youth clubs are on the western side of the city. All the new investment in youth stuff has been on the western side of the city.
Hilsey hasn't got very much either, has it?
No, but he got stuff in Stamford Park. But kids don't observe. When we had really good youth activity in Milton, we had lots of kids from Paulsgrove coming down. But the finance for that's gone. So I think it's to look at that,
Yeah.
what is available, and of course one of the best schools in terms of the summer reading challenge is in the middle of Charles Dickens Ward, which is the heart of deprivation in the city. So it is not a simple read across.
No. So when we asked earlier on, in fact you asked, how are we going to do this? It sounds like a mapping exercise is a possibility. Anything else? No.
I am not the chair,
No.
nor spokesman therefore.
You just go. Okay. Councillor, sorry.
I'm going to take on Gerald's role on this, or Judith's. You've got two suggestions there, and I'm looking at Gerald as a member of the committee. You've got 5. So which one is the committee going to run with, or what's the priorities? Is one going to take a year? Because in theory, these sorts of reports traditionally go to Cabinet if they're a year in about March, something in that sort of order. Do you think some are going to be quicker than others? How many are you going to do in a year, and what's your priorities?
Kadir may remember better than me. I think the one on the property is going to take Tom a bit of time to prepare for. I get the impression that Tom Southall, sorry, who runs property. I get the impression that Russell will want the others done fairly fast, and maybe on the basis of doing one a month. But I might be completely wrong.
Is there a lot to do? One a month? I just feel that one a month seems to be not enough time to do a lot of things. You can't do this one in one a month.
Well, I think we're scheduled on EDCL to meet monthly, and I think the idea is that we do one subject each meeting. But I've never been on scrutiny before, so I don't know.
I sort of come back to where I started, Mary, in the fact that you're sitting there reading all this out. Gerald's sitting there giving it, I might be right, I might be wrong, but it's somebody else's decision, and we've got nothing on the paper in front of us. I mean, if we're talking about doing one a month, how, as Brian just quite rightly said, how are you going to achieve that? Because the property one strikes me as being a biggie.
That's a 6-month one, isn't it? Sorry.
That's going to be
That's a 6-month one, said somewhere.
That's going to be a biggie, and if you're going to do culture and literacy from deprived communities, are you really going to be doing that, doing that properly if you're going to do that in a month? I wouldn't.
I think that would be
that.
years more like it, really.
Because you're looking to put forward a report to the cabinet member. They say this is an action plan to improve culture and literacy in a little easy for me to say in deprived areas. That's what ultimately we're looking to do. Is send a report to a cabinet with some recommendations that cabinet are either going to accept or reject. But there's got to be an action plan on the back of it. I'm at a loss to be quite honest.
I mean, I think if you're thinking about a topic like that, you might want to consider who wants to give evidence. Would it be some of the schools who would want to give evidence? Which ones? And maybe inviting people to come and give evidence. So I think we probably need a little bit more in respect of a time scale, because I think something will take more than one meeting. I don't think you can cover some of the topics that have been suggested in one meeting. I suppose if something is a review of where we are and is this worth a scrutiny, it could be done in 1 month, because you may not know whether it's worth it. You need some preliminary information, an information report which says actually there is something here that needs doing. But I think one of the longer ones does require a bit more thought about evidence and who's going to be invited and the time scale.
If I might make a suggestion, Chair. In theory, scrutiny management is sort of scheduled to meet twice a year, if that, this meeting and the budget meeting. It might be worth saying to EDCL, go away and start with your literature one and just concentrate on that one, let's say, because I appreciate Tom Southall is probably going to be doing prep work in the background for the properties one, which is nothing to stop him doing that. And I also I'm also looking at the one from Tom Coles, when he's talking about a target date of August. There's nothing to stop us having a second scrutiny management meeting, perhaps let's call it autumn for sake of argument, where those panels that have finished, which could be Russell's and it probably will be Tom's, and we can have another meeting at that point to say, okay, these panels have finished and submitted their reports. Let's hold another one to approve a second one and do it like that. I mean, I'm not going to die in a ditch over it, but we're only talking about one meeting here, and it may well be that they might come back and say, actually, it's a bigger piece of work than we thought, and we're going to keep going. Might be a suggestion.
Just going on what Simon was saying, it's basically the housing one. I'm on the housing one, and to my knowledge, we haven't agreed anything. The asbestos policy was brought up with, I think, 3 or 4 other things, if my memory serves me correctly, that basically weren't in the remit. And all we're getting on the 13th of August, or it may be the day before the 13th of August, is a briefing on our asbestos policy at the moment. So, as far as I was concerned, we've not agreed anything. I may be wrong.
This is going from bad to worse.
Go on, Gerald.
Well, are we allowed to suggest things to the panels?
Absolutely.
Because it seems to me, and I don't know if this might be difficult for Tom, as chair of this one, but the housing and social care one is housing and social care. The bit which is the massive risk to this council
Social care.
is the integrated care board and its financial incompetence and its mismanagement of integration of health and social care. That has the ability to have enormous impact on citizens coming out of hospital, and an enormous impact on the council if that integration that we built up so well, because we had a coterminous area for health and social care in Portsmouth, goes out the window. Yeah. And it has gone out the window. And we know from feedback that Portsmouth residents used to have a really good transition from the hospital into social care. You talk to ambulance drivers, they tell us time and time again that Portsmouth residents got out of QA quicker than Hampshire residents. And yet we've been forced into something that looks as if it's going to disadvantage our residents. And that would seem to me a really good thing for a scrutiny panel to get their teeth into. Now, I know we got the health overview of the scrutiny panel, which Graham ably vice chairs, but actually there's a social care scrutiny panel as well, and one or either of them could get their teeth into it because it's an enormous issue that has huge risks for the people of the city and the council.
Thoughts, Graham?
So I was thinking. Yes, I mean, I think John's made a good point about that. The Health Overview and Scrutiny Panel tends to cover a bit of a wider remit because we have representatives from other local authorities, because it covers the area that effectively the hospital trust covers. So we have people from outside of Portsmouth who are on the panel. We do ask questions about that, but it's very much, we haven't done a proper review. I think the Scrutiny Panel could ask more serious questions and detailed questions about the processes by which things happen, and could hopefully do something on that to maybe highlight where there are gaps and where there are going to be problems from what we previously had. I think John's point was well made about the changes that are, and highlight those so that the ICB is made aware of it, and also that the council is made aware of it. I mean, the cabinet, we can continue to pursue that. So I think there is a possibility of suggesting a topic, and that might be well worth pursuing. But I'm not on that, so it's up to them.
Just read out the middle paragraph.
Right, this is an email that I received on whenever it was, about the 16th, I think it was. But basically, yeah, it's basically saying the housing officers will give an overview of PCC's approach to managing asbestos. and literally there's nothing in there that is saying that we're going to do a scrutiny on it. It literally is just saying that we're getting a briefing. So where that's come from, that we're going to, you know, it's, I think Gerald was there but had to disappear rapidly. I think you was there for about a minute or two because you had to disappear, Gerald, but I don't think you, but yeah, it just seems strange that we're saying that we're doing a scrutiny panel on asbestos when basically all we're getting is a briefing on asbestos. Unless something comes up at the briefing that we can take it on board, but as far as I know, that basically all we're doing is we're getting a briefing on the PCC's policy on asbestos.
Chair, Chair, if I may, asbestos is covered by some strict government legislation, and therefore the City Council will have probably a very strong policy on how it deals with asbestos in our properties, because it goes all the way through the process. I don't need to spell out the dangers. We all know what the dangers are with regards to asbestos. What Raymond's email says in the middle of it is that there's a report going to the Cabinet member in September on the asbestos policy. So, politely, what's the point of this scrutiny panel about something that's highly regulated and is going to the Cabinet in September anyway, which suggests is why they've got August here as that. My argument would be, and I would suggest that that one for that scrutiny panel, we reject it, because it's not going to add any value, I can't think, other than they're going to sit there and listen to a briefing, which if they go to the Cabinet meeting, they'll probably hear exactly the same briefing.
Gerald?
That sounds there's a significant logic to that, because as Simon says, it is that there are really strict rules nationally about what you can and cannot do, etc. If they're looking for something to do, one of the things that's happened recently, and is quite unusual in housing, is that we bought 800 houses from Clarion.
Yeah.
Now, there must be lessons to learn from how that went. Did that go well, badly, etc.? What's the response from tenants? And if it went well, what room is there for potential purchases from other registered social landlords in the city who are wanting to dispose of stock as well? It was quite a big financial risk for the council to take on 800 places, 800 houses, but it might be that other people want out as well.
Sorry, Mary.
Sorry, not sorry.
But again, something like that will have followed strict purchasing procedures and will have been a full council decision based on it. I can't see what scrutiny is going to add to that process. Scrutiny was not involved in, let's say, the purchase of Lakeside or anything like that, because it was ended up as a full council decision where we all took a vote. What is scrutiny going to achieve, other than it might prejudice some members that might be for or against it in a public scrutiny meeting at the end of the day? I can't see what that actually adds to anything. I would go back to your integrated care board one, and I would suggest that actually, even though we can't flesh the bones out, if we're looking at these one by ones, I would propose that with the one for Housing and Social Care Scrutiny Panel, that we reject what they've actually got there with regards to asbestos. We don't send maintenance in to remove asbestos. There are specialist registered companies that do all that sort of stuff. There's going to be a protocol behind it. And we suggest they come back with something around the impact of the integrated care board, and I'll let somebody with a bit more knowledge flesh out the bones around that one. That's my suggestion for that, just that one panel, if we're going to do these individually.
Okay, can we take a vote on that?
Could I ask, actually saying no to them, is that, and there's the chair, is there anybody else from the panel here apart from Ray? Okay, and who wasn't at I just don't. It just I feel slightly uncomfortable of saying reject. I kind of Simon's previous proposal of sort of coming back and saying to them, look, we need to know more about stuff, come and explain to them properly, and putting things on ice until then, I feel more comfortable with,
Hang on, Graham?
because I'm a nice person.
Yeah, all I was going to say there,
No.
Gerald. Oh, sorry, Graham. Yeah, sorry.
I mean, if we want to be diplomatic, I think what we can say is the panel is not convinced that there is much value in doing a review because a report is going to the cabinet member a month later, unless it is intended as some sort of pre-review scrutiny, which I don't think is the case because they're not getting anybody else in to do it. So we recommend they reconsider that as a topic. I think that's what's. Yeah.
Perhaps I just refer people to the flow chart. It says, will scrutiny be duplicating existing work? Well, yes, it will be, in which case it arrows straight to the box that says topic not for inclusion within the work programme.
So I've just been informed that this is actually feeding into the report.
My
but,
understanding
yeah.
is that it will be feeding into the
James,
report, so
put
it
your
would be.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry, spend all evening turning the other microphones off and turn my own one on. My understanding is that there is a report that is going to the Cabinet member, and that the purpose of scrutiny looking at the report in advance is to feed into the report and to put some views in terms of pre-scrutiny, as Councillor Heaney has just suggested. So that's my understanding as to what the purpose is and why it's been scheduled in August before the Cabinet members' meeting.
That's the sort of thing we need to know in writing. Any more for any more?
Is that still agreed? Even so?
Basically, without sort of looking to criticise anybody, I thought that this meeting today was to go all through this lot. I didn't know I had to put this in here. I wasn't told of that, but I've got it all here for you. But with Ray's situation there, surely the scrutiny panel should have had the decision, not thinking about it in any way, but the decision that we're doing this, and then we come to reject it or put it, pass it forward, whatever. I think we should all have our ideas sat here now, and this is what we want to do. Do you accept or not accept it? And that don't appear to that they know what they're doing yet. They're just making a suggestion. We might look at this, or we might, but it should have been there. Mine should have been there, but it's there.
But on the other hand, Brian, you're the chair of the panel.
We will come to yours, Brian.
What I'm
Don't
saying
worry.
is, Brian, you tick the box because you are the chair of your panel, so therefore you're here to be grilled by me and Gerald.
Gerald's on the panel.
Me then.
And of course, I always agree with Brian. But I do think we need to say to them, we need to know more about what you're going to do after you've had a little look at this in August. What on earth are you going to do after that? And here is a suggestion of something we think you might want to get your teeth into.
That's why I suggested an autumn meeting.
What I'll do is I'll contact Tom in the next couple of days, as I'm the vice chair, and find out exactly what the scenario is, and I'll try and get it back to everyone on what's going on, because at the end of the day, to my knowledge, we hadn't agreed anything. So, and I was at that informal sort of teams meeting, so there was about 3 or 4 things that were put forward, and then the only thing that came out of it was that this asbestos briefing on the 13th. So I will speak to Tom and see if we can actually come up with a suggestion.
I'm probably in a minority here, but I am still of the opinion that this does not fit within a scrutiny works programme. We're talking about the asbestos one. There's going to be a robust report going to the cabinet member in September. there are opposition spokesmen that will have a briefing and that they can feed into that particular report. I don't see what scrutiny is going to add to it. It's going to just be duplicating and not adding any value. So personally, I can't support that, but the majority may say differently.
So let's vote on that one. Those for going ahead with it or approving it, hands please. 2, 3. Against? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. The rejection is so.
Thank you, Chair. So, Councillor Vernon Jackson put forward...
Can I go back? Yeah, with that vote, Brian voted, he's not a member of the committee. Sorry? Therefore, I think it was, instead of being 4-3, I think it's 3-3, and therefore it rests with you as a casting vote.
I agree to reject it.
Thank you. So just to be clear, we have rejected the asbestos topic. As Councillor Vernon Jackson put forward a little bit earlier, as a possible review for the HSC scrutiny panel to consider is impact on social care by the ICB being introduced, and for the panel, HSC panel, to work up some documents to come back to a meeting in the autumn of SMP for consideration. So are members happy that we take that approach to suggest a topic to HSC panel along those lines?
Before we actually go on, before I vote, this is a suggestion, not a directive, yes?
Correct.
So they can actually come back with something else?
Yes.
Or we can come back with something else?
Exactly.
Six, 7. Against? Abstain. You can't do nothing, can you? My apologies. Yeah. Wow, this is turning out to be eventful, isn't it? Okay. Where are we on now? Education?
So let's go to education.
Yeah.
And we've got the topics in the agenda, and obviously got the chair here.
Yep. So we've got the chair for education here.
Hello, thank you, Chair. So the Education, Children and Young People Scrutiny Panel have met in June and July to discuss topics that we wish to put forward for the Scrutiny Work Programme. We've also asked for an update on the report over this municipal year from the report that went to Cabinet around employment and training opportunities. But the first actual topic that we would like to put forward is looking at work experience opportunities for young adults within PCC. And this is just to explore the Council's support around all directorates for young people who aren't in education, whether they're NEET, at risk of NEET, youth offenders, care experienced young people, or young people with an educational healthcare plan. I think young people would really benefit from support within PCC and our external bodies as well. And so that's what we want to look for. We've invited the directors hopefully to come to 2 meetings in September, just to see where they are with what opportunities they have across the council. And this is the first one that we want to put forward. Did you want me to go through the others as well? Because we've got 4 topics, but it just
Shall we do them
depends.
one at a time?
Yeah.
Gerald?
It looks a really useful, interesting piece of work to do. Just a thought, Hannah, is it worth also looking at what opportunities some of our major contractors might be able to offer?
Yeah.
So the people who work with housing, etc. But also, I don't know, are you looking at the port and Portico and things like that? Just because I think our influence as an organisation is wide, and that could be huge benefits.
So what we were hoping to for the panel to do over between now and September when we meet next would be to send questions that we have to the directors in advance so that they can actually get information prepared ready. So for example, if we went to housing, how many opportunities do you think that they would be able to provide for how many children? Because we have thousands of children between 16 and 25. We did hear at one of the meetings that there was a member of staff in the council that offered their child work experience, but this is just because it was on a family basis. So we want to explore why is this not offered to so many other young people, especially those who are at risk, and to provide them training opportunities and work opportunities. We would want to explore all of, Portico. We have like libraries, museums, there are so many areas that lie within PCC that are covered under different areas. And we really want to just gauge sort of how wide we can do this. So our first meeting was for September, and then to invite external bodies to come in following that.
And I think it's a really useful one because I think particularly youngsters who missed out on work experience during COVID are particularly badly hit by this. So a really good thing to get your teeth into.
And sorry, just before, what we have heard from 2 officers that came to the last meeting are barriers that young people face when they are going to work. So if there is trauma involved, the barriers that they have to overcome to be able to go to work, and the sort of general leniency that we need to have as a council to support them so that, if they can't go into work for one day, that they're not just dismissed. We need to look through these, further issues as well.
Brian?
We, as you know, we touched on these topics last year, and certainly I'm 100% in favour for what you're doing, no question about that. I was the chair of that last year. Oh, well, you was the vice chair. But, we touched on it last year, didn't we? And I was quite strong on the fact that I don't think PCC are using our children as much as they could do. I think we should give preferential treatment. Not if somebody's better, you choose one of our children, although somebody's better because they're one of our children, not like that. But I think we should consider those children a little bit more than others. There was 375 last year of NEET, and 160 something of those were because they're not allowed to work. As again, you would know full well, they're not allowed to work. They're immigrants. They haven't got their visas, and although they want to work, they're not working at all. They're not in education. They're not in training. They're not in nothing, which I think is very sad. And I think that's something else that, if you could just look into that for me, it's that which hangs over from last year, and I do think we've got to help those as well. Thank you.
Simon?
I think it's an excellent topic you're actually looking at there. Perhaps my concern, and it's an understanding of the scrutiny process, that topic panels come up with their suggestions, they take it to scrutiny management, we sign it off, which is probably what we're going to do here, and then it goes back to the scrutiny committee, who then start to shape how they're going to do it, who they're going to consult, and how they're going to do it. And my experience of some of the panels I've sat on, that these things tend to grow legs if you're not careful. So you need to have a pretty focused scope that you're actually looking for. I guess my concern, and it's not the subject, is the target completion date as much as anything, because I think that once you start getting into the meat of this, where you've got review 2 to 3 meetings, I think that might become 3 to 4 and something like that. I applaud the ambition of the end of November, but I'm wondering whether that's going to slip into next year if you're not careful. Once you start to widen out what you're actually looking at, I think you're going to find that fine. I don't disagree with that, but it might have an impact on what you're looking at in the rest of your programme for the year if you're not careful. And it may well be that you might have to look at one of these four and say, okay, we might have to drop one off somewhere along the line because we just aren't going to have the programme to actually do it.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. So I do agree. I think that's why we'd like to have 2 meetings in September so that we can understand where we are within PCC's sort of stance around the opportunities that they provide, and then we'd have a further meeting October, November, just around. So, for example, the second one, the elective home education.
Before we go on to that one, do you want to extend this at this meeting? Do you want to tell us that you need a couple of months more?
Yeah, I mean, we can put an extension if you feel it's needed. We could put that to December.
It's you that kind of needs to tell us, really.
I hope that we wouldn't, to be perfectly honest. I really do. I do think that this one will go, through for November.
Would you like to tell us about?
Just a quick thing. I think it's a really good bit of work, but just a bit for James, really. It's a real difference, this item, compared to the first two. We've got the chair here that we can ask questions, you can explain.
Yeah.
Is there any way in future we can do a bit more to get a chair, or the chairs, or a vice chair here, so we can have the same sort of discussion?
I might put a call in to them next time beforehand.
Yeah, because it is a real difference between the first two items we've discussed.
Hannah, do we want to take a vote on this, by the way? It's all fine, yeah? All
Okay, so the elective home education numbers have been growing steadily over the last 2 years. There was a review that was undertaken in 2018, so we just wanted to sort of review it and see how the numbers had sort of compared, which is why we think it's only going to really need one meeting, likely to be in December, to review this and put anything forward following the next one for the elective home education. If anyone wants any questions.
Your name's gone out of my head.
I know, Jez.
Gerald Vernon Jackson. I mean, how could you forget that?
So, Hannah, having spent a bit of time talking with some parents, this is, I'd have thought, it's going to be highly contentious. Because there's lots of different strands to this. There's the issue that some parents have felt that kids with special educational needs don't get the support that they need within mainstream. There is the undercurrent that says that some schools encourage parents to de-roll their children so that they're not excluded, and I think that's quite worrying. There's also because the council has a duty to make sure that every child has an education, but not necessarily at school, different councils do it in different ways. Because it's our responsibility to make sure that kids are not just sat in front of the telly. And therefore, in Portsmouth, we've asked for evidence of the education that children are having. And I think there is issues of the tone of what we do and what Hampshire does are very different. So I would expect a lot of parents would want to be involved in this, and I would have thought 5, 6 or 7 meetings is a more realistic thing with the amount of, it is such a contentious issue amongst a group of highly articulate parents, because the home educated children are a mixture between those parents who are highly articulate and are providing a really good education, varied education, some of whom are really happy to provide evidence and some of whom are ideologically deeply opposed to doing so, and the children that the council has a duty to protect who are not in school but who are not receiving an education. And it's and of course that nobody sits in exactly one part of that. It is really, really sensitive stuff. And I've had very, very strong views expressed on this. I think it's a really good thing to look at. I think it's going to take a lot of, because it is so, the de-rolling of kids out of secondary schools particularly and sorry, I need probably declare I'm deputy chair of the Children and Young People's Board at the LGA. De-rolling of secondary school pupils, particularly from where it is suggested that what schools say to parents is, you don't want your child to go down the record of having been permanently excluded from. Isn't it a better bet if you home educate? Is a big national issue.
I think if I can just sort of intervene quickly. I think from the topics that we're looking at, I think there is so much scope into each one. We could probably take a year on each one, but as we looked at under the flow chart, we wanted to just to revisit like this one, for example. If there is further work that's needed, then I think we would have to look at that further. But I would like us to potentially just look at the difference between 2018 and now, and then if we need to do further work, we'll discuss it at that meeting and how we can put that into place. But all of the topics, you could spend the whole year looking over all of them.
Graham?
Yeah, in fact, I was going to raise some similar points to Gerald. Gerald's done it, so I won't repeat them. But there are some questions about, if you were going to review, should it be a bit more comprehensive? Because I think parents will expect the Education Authority, if it has done a review, to involve them in some way. What you don't want is necessarily a litany of individual complaints, so people coming to them and come out. You want to find some way of getting a representative view of it. And there are obviously national bodies and companion bodies who talk about that, who could contribute maybe. And the point that Gerald made about the difference of approach between different authorities may impact on how we are perceived by parents. So I do think that's something worth thinking about. So maybe a little bit more about how far the scope should go. I conceive about looking at where the review into 18 months was before I was on the council, so I don't quite know what happened there. But I just think a bit of caution about that, and maybe it'll take longer.
Simon?
Yeah, I was following the same sort of theme, in so much that when I looked at that one, I thought single meeting is very ambitious. And in fact, if you look at all three of those, they are very ambitious topics to consider. And it may well be a suggestion, but what we have done in the past, because I've sat on a panel that's done it, even though we've traditionally potentially changed through elections and whatever the makeup of the panel, we've set a 2-year programme on some topics because they are so big. Minded that we haven't got elections next year, so in theory, I would like to assume that the scrutiny panels, the membership will probably remain largely unchanged, and to my mind, those three panels, those three topics, could be a 2-year programme. And I don't have a problem with any of them. I think the comments that Gerald have made are well-founded, and I think it's an ambitious programme to try and do it in a year. I would say take the pressure off that panel and say, let's make it a 2-year programme so that we can do all three topics justice.
Brian?
Yes, I think you're right there, Simon. I think the people who were involved last year will agree that Sam and the rest of the officers were very, very good. And we had people in from all sorts of walks of life. And we even had a screen up there, didn't we, with three children who obviously were a bit shy to come in here, but explaining everything. So I think, you're going to get a lot of help in there, which is brilliant. And B, what Simon said, I think it's going to take a lot longer than what we're anticipating. And if we say that hopefully it's going to be 2 years, then you can work longer than November on the first one, etc., can't you?
Yeah, and I would completely endorse that. You know, as the chairman, also being on the panel last year, it was really heartwarming, wasn't it? What the topic that we had, which falls into the first topic again, and I would like to see four of these through over the next 2 years. So happy to take that on board.
Agreed, everybody? Yeah.
2 years.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
So we have online safety for children. This is really, really close to my heart in particular, and I think having a 14-year-old and a 2-year-old, whether you have children or not, the internet scares the living daylights out of me. It genuinely does, even more so when you have children because of... I think this could be sort of scoped a lot further, so we've asked to invite the Youth Parliament to give their views on Hampshire Constabulary, but also to approach schools around their best practice. I do have a teenager, so I'm aware of what's being delivered in her schools, but it can literally take a week for a child to be approached. And as I said, and you know, I don't sort of hold anything back. My daughter was groomed last year within a couple of weeks. So for me, I'm so aware. I mean, I'm not techie savvy in any way, shape or form. I have to be now. But it can literally be done in an instant, and it's scary. And I want to protect my child, but I also want to protect other children. And I would hate for anyone to be in the same situation. That's just on a personal note from me. But I wish that the internet could be a safe place. When I was a child, we didn't have to worry about online safety. It was more crossing the road with hardly any cars going by. But, you know, now you worry more about the internet sometimes than crossing the road. So, yes, it could be that it does take... We haven't put a time limit on this, but... you know, I think more so, especially for the government and for these social media companies, a hell of a lot more needs to be done to protect children.
Gerald?
It's a very sensible thing to look at. I just wondered if the risk to young people's mental health is just frightening, and the debate at the moment seems to be around whether it is possible or desirable to say that people under the age of 16 should not have access to social media, or whether they shouldn't even be able to get phones that can do that. And maybe actually a very helpful, particularly if you're working with the Youth Parliament, a particularly helpful bit about what you might come up with would be recommendation to Parliament and government about where they should go with that. So I think it would be a really useful piece of work.
Graham?
Just briefly, I mean, I think the idea of asking young people what they would like to see in respect of getting a safer experience is actually really valuable, because I think there's a tendency for us to say, well, we should ban them from the NEC, take away their phones, which is a bit of a blunt instrument, and maybe we need to think about slightly different ways of doing that. So that could be a good opportunity to find out what young people want, because the point, of course, is that, as Hannah said, you know, when you were at school, if you were bullied at school, you came home and you were away from it. The trouble is, it follows you home, you know, and you're on your phone and that, so it's a real problem for young people. So a good topic, I think, yeah.
And we ban children from having cigarettes until a certain age. We ban them from having alcohol until a certain age.
They still have them.
Yeah, but there is a there is something legal that says what should and shouldn't be.
We look after them from that point of view, you're right. Yeah. Really good. Yeah. Microphones, please.
I was going to ask about topic 4.
Topic 4, this was put forward by Councillor Ian Tyndall, and it's looking at how hard it is to place pupils through the fair access protocol. I don't have a lot of information or knowledge around this. It's something that he brought forward, and it was something that we were really interested in exploring further. So I apologise because we haven't looked into the topic or discussed it, as it was the 4th one, but it was something that he wanted to really look at.
Because of his work and his history, he's the ideal guy for it. He would be very thorough and know what he's talking about.
So my experience of it, mine's probably a little bit out of date now, but the fair access protocol, it was to try to get a sharing out amongst particularly secondary schools, but I think maybe some primary, but particularly secondary schools, of difficult to place pupils. Because when they were all council schools, then it was easy to do, but the arrival of trusts meant that people could choose not to. And I think it's worked relatively well, because I think the idea was always trying to be, we don't want to create one school which is the sink school, where everybody who's hard to place is always in one, because that's not good for anybody. But it's a useful, but I think it's wider than alternative provision. I think it's also mainstream provision.
Can I suggest that you take a bit more time to scope this one out and bring it back in the autumn?
Yeah,
Because we have actually got nothing written in front of us.
Yeah, I think we were being very ambitious, having the 3 that we were hoping to look at over the year, and this was sort of the 4th one. We didn't want to not put it on there in case we were lucky to go through, but I don't want any of the topics to be rushed in any way, so we have put it there, and we will scope it further.
Simon?
I was just going to sort of add to that. I think with the three topics that we've got here, I think they're 3 very, very good ones, and I think your timescale is ambitious. If we're going to have a scrutiny management meeting in, let's say, the autumn, we're going to be having another one at this time next year at the very minimum. It may well be to hold that one back and bring it forward with some more flesh on the bones at one of the later meetings once you work your way through the top 3. And I think that's probably the best course, not to reject it, far from it, but to say hold it there and add it to the bottom as you work through the top ones.
Are we all agreed on that? Sounds sensible? Thank you. Brilliant.
Good afternoon.
Hello, Brian.
The option decision of the text scrutiny panel was that our main topic will be a review of our environmental antisocial behaviour.
Brian, before you go any further, have we got anything to give out?
No, that's what I say, because I didn't know. I'm sorry, I did not know. Otherwise, it would have been done for you. I didn't know. The topic was agreed with the panel on July the 22nd. The objectives are to examine ways to reduce the amount of rubbish on the streets and in the open spaces so that they are cleaner, neater places for residents and obviously our tourists alike. We would like to find out how other authorities are tackling these issues to see if they can give us any input on that, because some areas of Portsmouth are downright disgusting. That's not to say that the council officials are not doing what they can, the people in responsibility for it, but I think, I've got a lot of things to say later on about it, but I think we've got to find ways of improving the way we are. The reason this was chosen was because of the council meeting we had full council on March the 19th, where it's agreed to put in a notice of motion for the Pride of the Streets of Portsmouth. The inquiry format will be by gathering formal evidence at meetings. Corporate priority linked to this: keep the city clean, tidy and safe, collections of bins and other offer recycling. We've spoke with that so far, Gerald will say, and Gerald brought something in about the bags. We need to get rid of dustbin bags. They go out on the streets for collection. You can't blame people for putting it out there the night before for collecting at 7 o'clock in the morning. And by the time 7 o'clock in the morning comes along, they've all been ripped open by the foxes, the cats, the rodents, etc., etc., etc. But I think you've got some information later for that, Gerald. Putting them in the spot again. We have chosen 4 topics, if you like, and obviously we'll go for this street cleansing thing first of all, and any ways that we can keep the streets from not getting so filthy in the first place. Broken glass was mentioned by Councillor Gerarda in her area. So I suppose where you've got the pubs and the nightlife, etc., they just smash the bottles down. Women with pushchairs, etc., got to walk all over it. People, invalids, can't sometimes get along the pavement because of it. So, you know, they have to go out on their roads with their invalid vehicles. We need to find out on keeping these streets clean, on what colas are responsible for, but they're not responsible for all street cleaning. The council themselves are responsible for some. The response times in fly tipping, in general, are pretty good. But again, let's try and find ways of improving this. Now, the problem we have there is that a lot of fly tipping is actually done on private land, which we've got no authority over. So it can be a disgrace, it can be smelly, it can cause rats, it can cause so-and-so, but it's private land. So therefore we have to attack that in a different way. The 2 other items on the list are after we've done that one, are sewerage in the seas. Now, God knows what we're going to do about that, but when I was 14, 15 years of age, I was swimming at Hayling Island in amongst everything. And you wouldn't think 60 years later we got the same round our coast now. I think it's a disgrace. And somebody's got to be held accountable. Maybe all the fat cats in the water company should sort something out about that. The other thing which Gerald brought up, and he's having quite a problem in this area, is police response times, which are sometimes disgraceful. So we'd like to have words with police officers, etc., and find out what we can help them. We all know they're understaffed, we all know they're short of money, etc., etc., but that we could help them in some way that we could try and speed this up to make the residents happier. And the last thing is, which was my favourite, but I got outvoted, was prevent. Prevent is about the threat of terrorism in and around the Dockyard area, well, in and around Portsmouth, but obviously we're one of the biggest naval ports there are. Naughty girl. And the threat of terrorism is always there. So I think I'd like to try and get that in before the end of the year.
But the panel didn't support that, Brian, so you can't.
Yes, it did support it.
Really?
Yeah, to do it at the end.
I can't remember whether we said we would support it, or at least it was at the if there was time.
If we got time at the end, yeah.
It's just that you started off by saying you were the only one and nobody supported it, so it's like...
No, I wanted it to go first.
Okay.
None of them wanted it to go first, so I accepted the panel's decision.
I have to ask,
Sorry?
the sewage discharges in the sea, I'm wondering what's to begin, because that's really the Environment Agency that deals with that.
Yeah, this was put through by, was that you, yes. Gerald? Yeah, this was put through by Gerald.
Well, I think it's a mixture of things. So it's
antisocial.
So the Environment Agency has some role. The water companies clearly have a role. There is a really simple sort for quite a lot of this that Southern Water could do, but they consistently choose not to do and not to include within their capital programme. So at the moment, everything also is produced up on the island, not on the island, on the mainland, has to come down all the way down to Eastney, to be pumped back to Havant and then pumped back to Eastney and out to sea. There is no linkage between Cosham and Drayton and Farlington and Bud's Farm directly. So that when it rains bad, and when because the roads come down the hill, when it rains, the sewers get absolutely overwhelmed, at which point they have to open the floodgate, the storm gates, and let raw sewage out into the harbour. So there is a simple way that Southern Water could be sorting that out, but they consistently refuse to put that into their capital programme, and our residents and the wildlife suffer because of that. I can think of no more logical thing to do for an organisation to scrutinise than Southern Water, and we should be holding their feet to the fire.
Simon.
I disagree with what a lot of Gerald said, but I come back to what the role of scrutiny actually is in all this. Scrutiny will end up going through its process, producing a report that will go to the cabinet member or the cabinet, depending on what the role is, to agree or disagree with the recommendations. Now, we've had Southern Water notice of motion forever, I think, and I think I said it at the last time we actually have one. Depressingly, we're going to be here saying the same things year after year after year. But what does the I'm looking at you, Brian, here. What do you think your committee can do to influence Southern Water? Because more often than not, a notice of motion is lots of people standing up and having a good old rant and a rave, and it usually finishes off with the leader shall write a letter, and or sometimes and all the other group leaders, and so therefore I as a group leader get a letter saying, am I happy with the text of this? Because we're scanning your signature on the bottom and off it jolly well goes. And, yep, fine, off it jolly well goes. And you think we've had an hour's worth of debate to send off a letter that's going to be totally ignored. What do you think it's going to achieve by actually doing this? And the same argument applies to police response times. What do you think a scrutiny meeting is going to have? I know that there is an agenda for Gerald to want to get Donna in front of a committee so he can have a go at it. That's all he's ever wanted to do.
This is her side.
Yeah, I know. There's that loving and all that sort of stuff. But
that wasn't your
I know. I'm sorry. I can see exactly what's going to happen. Donna's going to turn up. You're going to have that. She's going to tell you about an extra 600 coppers. Da-di-da-di-da. You're going to write a report, but how's that going to improve police response times? An area where the City Council have got no control, in the same way that with sewage discharges into the sea, the City Council has got no control over that whatsoever. I'll bring you back to your flowchart.
Graham.
I think I agree with Simon on this. I mean, there's nothing to stop the City Council pressing Southern Water directly to change the way in which it operates its sewage system, and that would be, we could do that tomorrow. We don't have to wait for a scrutiny review to do it. And it goes back to the point is, is that it says, well, can scrutiny add value in terms of supporting service improvement? Well, I'm not sure it can. It can say what we've already said. Is this topic one which scrutiny can realistically influence? Well, the scrutiny panel isn't, but the City Council directly talking to Southern Water possibly has more influence. And just to pick up on a point that I picked up the other week, one of my colleagues on the Laxton Harbour Board was suggesting that we could sue Southern Water because they are polluting Laxton Harbour on the basis of a recent court case between the Manchester Ship Canal and the United Utilities. The only problem, of course, is the Manchester Ship Canal own the canal, and we don't own the harbour, and therefore they were suing them for trespass and nuisance, and it doesn't work because I've already had some legal advice that it just wouldn't work. So we have to try and think of things that are realistic that will produce a result. And whilst I'm fully in agreement with the appalling behaviour of Southern Water, I don't think us spending time going around it is necessarily going to produce any value.
Sorry, Brian?
I can't disagree with you, Simon, excepting that I personally, I took advice on this, as I like to do. I would like to get the councillors in, sorry, not the councillors, the council officials in, to see what, with the sewerage I'm on about, to see what has been done, what's been said, etc. What are they doing? If they do, at the end of the day, if the government can't do much, I can't see us sitting here going to be able to do a lot. But I'd like to see what they're trying to do. So I'm more on the council. Getting Southern Water in, they're going to give you the same old flannel all the time, and we're going to get nothing out of it. As for the police, I don't know whether we can do much there. I do think we can, or we've got an opportunity. And again, I'd like to see what the council officials, their response to the police timing, because the police timing is very bad. I'm the first to agree on that. But that comes down to the budgets, that comes down to the government, etc., etc., etc. But I'd just like more information. And obviously, as chair of the scrutiny panel, I'm allowed to get more information. And to see whether there is anything in any way we can help with the police more than the sewerage. Simon.
Gerald?
Oh, sorry, Gerald.
So it seems to me that one of the things that the scrutiny panel can do is ask people from Southern Water to come and explain what the policy is, why they've chosen the investment route that they've done, why they've chosen to ignore things that can make a difference here in Portsmouth. And I'm not sure that any other bit of the council has done that, or if it's a scrutiny thing, we don't just scrutinise what the council does, we scrutinise other things, and it gives us the ability to hold other organisations to account. And I think that would be a useful thing for us to be able to do, for people, for Southern Water, to hear people what the problem is, but also to explain where their decision making has lied, because they could have sorted this out a long time ago, and it's their decision not to. So, and I think we're in a different mindset where I think the water companies now have to listen to people because of the public pressure. With the police one, I specifically didn't want Donna particularly to come because this is operational stuff, and Donna doesn't do operational stuff. So this, I have a slightly different view from Brian. From my point of view, this is not about beating the police around the head. This is to understand what their problems are and to understand how they use their time so that people in the community know. My understanding is they seem to spend an inordinate amount of time looking after people with mental health issues and an immense amount of time dealing with domestic violence. Now, if those two things, which most people won't know or see, are using all the police time, then that gives the police the ability to inform and so that we've got the ability to say to people, okay, your response time may be rubbish for something, but actually our police officers are spending their time trying to make sure that people are not killed within domestic violence things that can escalate. No, I don't know if that's how they spend their time, but I think there is a use for us to be able to work, to hold the police to account, but also to work with the police to understand the pressures they're under out in the city every day. And that seems to me a useful thing for us to look at.
Okay, John. Graham? I mean, Simon? And then Graham.
Sorry about this. Sewage discharge in the sea. Let's just look at that one first, because I'll come back onto the police one if I may, Chair. We're not a parliamentary select committee. We can invite people to come and give evidence, but they can choose to say no. And the chances are, with Southern Water being the arrogant organisation they are, we'll start to do this, and the main person will turn around and say, well, actually, no, we've got no responsibility to your scrutiny committee, and then we will not do anything, we will not come, we will not give evidence. Arguably, the whole thing centres around the input of Southern Water, and you'll get an awful lot of cynical flannel from them probably. We'll end up with well-rehearsed arguments, an opportunity to beat Southern Water up, quite rightly so, but where is it going to actually take us? The alternative is that the committee comes up and says, actually, we think the City Council has to make a recommendation to the Cabinet. Let's spend £1 million on doing something about Southern Water from our own perspective, or, oh, hold on, actually buy it for £1, I seem to recollect, Gerald, was your idea from, we'll have to explore that. That could be an exploration line for you, Brian. But if we go down that particular line with a recommendation that says the City Council needs to spend money, this is a recommendation that goes to the Cabinet. So ultimately, and you're giving me that little smile to say, oops, you could end up with a report that you've authored that goes to the Cabinet that says we're going to need to spend money on this, that the Cabinet are going to turn around and say, oh, we haven't got the money to spend on this, we can't do it, and then you've shot yourself in the foot. But irrespective of that, my argument will be Southern Water will basically turn around and say, we're not answerable to Port City Council Scrutiny Committee, we're not going to bother to turn up, you can't influence what we're going to do, and you'll have no recommendation at the end of it. The same to a certain degree applies to response police times, whether you have an operational commander, which would be very nice to be there, or whether you have Donna or Terry or whoever it might be, they don't necessarily have to turn up, and actually, what's the metric? What are you looking to come out with it as a report that goes to the Cabinet that says, hey, we had lots of meetings with the police and they think it's all wonderful, or not, but where's the recommendation that's got a tangible result that's going to come out at the end of it? And in response to the points that you've been making about that, we have several police meetings in Drayton and Farlington, public meetings. That's not councillors, that's member of the public going and doing that. I know that Paulsgrove have done it, Hilsey have done it, Cossam have done it, Baffins have had 2, to the best of my knowledge, and Cotner did as well at Anchorage Lodge, I remember that one, where you had operational senior police officers and or Donna and or Terry there, depending on what they were, and they were dealing with what I could argue is the important people, the questions coming from members of the public, where a lot of it was explained. A lot of what you're trying to do is already being done through regular police meetings with residents in those areas that have issues that are pertinent to their own little areas. You know, Cotner High Street, Baffins, it was all about Tangier Road, generally speaking. Speeding traffic usually comes into it somewhere along the line. It always will do. But I cannot see what either of those two topics are actually going to add in the way of value to something other than getting a lot of people spending an awful lot of time and not being able to produce a report at the end of it, because the decisions that they're looking to take are not council decisions in any shape or form, they're external body operation, as opposed to the first one, which is litter, bins, recycling and a variety of things. That's about council services. That's where you can make a difference to what you're looking to achieve.
Excuse
and I
me?
can't see what they are going to achieve.
Graham and then Ian.
I mean, last year, I know Councillor Barrett was trying to organise a meeting between Southern Water and City Councils. We would all be invited to come along and put our questions. That meeting has not happened, presumably because Southern Water don't want to play. So I think that's part of the problem. You know, we could all go along to a meeting and raise these issues, but the question is, are they going to do it? And can we get anything out of it? And we have other mechanisms to do it. So again, yeah, I'm not sure it will be effective.
I think it's certainly worth giving it a try. I know it's a slightly different beast, but HOSP, we deal with the ambulance service, the ICB, hospitals, they all... but they still report into us. They're still external from the council. So I don't see why the police... We can't ask the police and Southern Water to get involved.
Sorry, Gerald and then Graham.
Well, the discussion we had earlier about social care and the ICB, we're looking at an external body. We don't know if they'll come and turn up and talk, but we hope they will, and we thought that was a useful thing to do. So why do we paint ourselves into a corner and say, oh, well, then nobody will turn up, nobody will talk to us, without even asking? So I get invited to regular meetings with Southern Water, strangely, through a councillor from Kent. And I'm not quite sure why I get invited, but I do. So, and they're happy to talk, and I'd be worried if we dismiss things that are of an interest to people in the city because before we've even asked, we think somebody won't turn up, and I think that's a worry. I know the police have, as I understand it, have said that they're no longer turning up to Neighbourhood Forum in Old Portsmouth, which is a disappointment, I know there. And if people choose not to interact, okay, then maybe it won't be as good as if they choose to interact. But I would be depressed if we just run the white flag of surrender up before anything's happened and think that we're not going to address issues because external organisations won't cooperate. I think it restricts what we're able to do. My understanding is that the scrutiny is meant to be able to look at things on a city-wide basis and not just be limited to things directly provided by the City Council. And that's one of the benefits that scrutiny has. And I think we should have some level of ambition.
Hannah and then Simon.
Thank you, Chair. I do agree with Simon, and I kind of echo what he was saying. In my eyes, I think, Brian, you've done, you're looking at these items as we would all look at it and as members of the public would look at it. So response times from the police are really important. The sewage discharge into the sea, you can see all the time between Eastney to Hayling how people are disgusted whether they're going to swim in sewage, whether they're going to surf in sewage, whether your dog's going to come back and be really sick because they swam in the sea. So, but, since we've been on the council, I think we've had a few notices of motion around sewage discharge. And like Simon said, a letter may go to Southern Water. Personally, I think between this and the police response times, as councillors, we should all be really on board with all of this. If it's such an important, and it is such an important topic, the Cabinet Member for Environment and Community Safety arrange a meeting with Southern Water. All councillors can be there, whether it's on Teams, and the same with police response times for the Cabinet Member to have a meeting or for it to go to the council. I can't see how we can scrutinise it when we, like you say, we can invite Southern Water and they may not come. That's just kind of a waste of time. It doesn't really seem, in my eyes, to sit under scrutiny management. It's a really important topic, but I don't think scrutiny management is the place for these two items to be discussed. I think it should be for all councillors to be able to be a part of under community safety.
Simon.
I'll bring it back to the flowchart, Chair. Is this topic one which scrutiny can realistically influence? Can scrutiny realistically influence response times in its report that goes to Cabinet? Or can it actually realistically deal with sewage discharges into the sea? I would suggest there might be an alternative topic to that, because you've actually had a change of government and something that would have an impact and something that we can have an influence on, and that is a review and the way forward on the Aquins interconnector. That might be a better topic for that, because that comes under environment and it probably also comes under community safety as well. If you look at the data cables they're looking to put in, it might be a viable alternative as a topic that might be considered. I think you might get more mileage out of that one, where we are, where we're going, what the impact of a change of government, and actually when you think about it, what Angela Rayner's talking about is taking major infrastructure projects to central government. I asked that question, is that going to have an impact? Is Aquins considered to be a major infrastructure project and would be taken in? My answer was yes, and speaking to planners, they said, we might have to add that to the risk assessment. That, to me, did not convince me that we were looking at it. To my mind, there is probably more mileage in a topic of reviewing and the way forward on Aquins than there is in those two, where you're relying on external organisations that may or may not turn up, but actually what you're looking to achieve, you won't be able to achieve with a report to Cabinet.
Graham.
Just a quick point about Councillor made about health scrutiny. Health scrutiny operates on a different legal framework than other scrutiny. It's very specific, and it does. So that's why the health organisations, they are required to consult with us about service changes, and they're required to report. So that's slightly different. That doesn't apply to other organisations. I mean, this is getting a slightly absurd, this debate, really, because if it's performative, which I think it is, it will be that. Gerald says he speaks to the water. He could ask the question, why haven't they done what he's asked them to do, and bring us the answer straight away, because we then get that answer. And the Aquin one is difficult because it's subject to a decision following a court case, and the Secretary of State still has to make that decision. So I'm not sure that a scrutiny review would be of any use, given that the Secretary of State will make a decision ASA. Yeah, I just think that is
Gerald,
probably
next.
not likely to happen in that respect.
So my understanding is that the Act Wind is already defined as a major national infrastructure thing, and was defined in that way by the previous government, which is why the decision rests with a minister, not locally. I don't think it was right, but that was the decision that was made. There's been a public inquiry into that, which then gave recommendations to the Secretary of State, who, from memory, recused themselves because they'd accepted money from the company, and therefore couldn't be involved. And it sat on ministers' desks for the last 2 years, while ministers have failed to make a decision. I think we could look at why ministers have failed to make a decision for 2 years, when the legal framework says that they have to make that decision within 3 months, and to look at the inefficiency within government departments, why that took place. And that might be helpful, but I'm not sure that would hit Simon's desire to hit within the flowchart, because I think it's unlikely that ministers will change their behaviour or previous ministers would have changed their behaviour of shoving it down into the long grass.
Hannah.
Exactly the same argument I've used for Southern Water.
Except that Southern Water might well turn up and talk to us. Previous
Hannah.
ministers have lost their
Hannah.
seats and are
Thanks,
irrelevant.
Gerald. I think we should personally just move forward and looking at the recommendations. So one would be to review the environmental antisocial behaviour. I think that should be the first topic to be looked at. 2 and 3, I think, could potentially have a vote about, then potentially put the reserve topic. Why would you not look into the council's work addressing prevent? You know, could we just put that one forward as a reserve topic and avoid the police and sewage? Not saying that they're not important, they are really important, but not necessarily for scrutiny.
Yeah, I think, Chair, we can agree to the first one. Again, if we're going to have an intermediary scrutiny management panel meeting, just stick with the one, drop the other 2 for the time being, and you can come back and make your arguments again at the next one if you think you've got a better argument for them or not. I suspect not, but perhaps we just approve the one and say, get cracking on with that one as it is.
Let's take a vote on the first one for
Can we
start.
just hang on before that? Can I just say something before that, please? Well, in that case, I'll probably make that first one last for a year, but because it's such an enormous topic. But my way of thinking about scrutiny panel is not just the subject or the outside company or whatever it may be, but it's our own attitude, our own officers' attitude and thinking on how to tackle the problems from outside companies. And that's what I said to you at the very start. I'd like to see what the council officials, officers, etc., are actually doing about Southern Water, are actually doing about police problems, not just the response time. And I've got a lot of sympathy for the police, so don't, I think it, well, did you say something about bashing them on the head? No, I'll never do that. I've got a lot of sympathy for the police. They've got a hell of a job. But what I am worried about, massively worried about, and it's not going to affect me because I'll be pushing up daisies long before that, but we'll be sitting here, you lot will be, in 20 years' time saying, what are we going to do about the sewerage in the sea? Guaranteed, it will not be solved in my lifetime. Ray looks like he's on his way out. So it's not, but I mean, I don't think it's going to be done in the next 5 or 10 years, no matter whether we do a scrutiny panel on it or not. But yeah, as I say, and everything that we do in the way of scrutiny work, all the scrutiny panels, they don't have 100% successes all the time. They don't all have a success on everything, and so maybe it will not be as full and the results that we want. But I don't necessarily think that we should, as you said there, just give in to them, cow down to them, and just just let them walk over us. So, but we go to the panel. Yes, those.
Shall we have a vote? First one, agree. Unanimous. Second one, police response times. Agree. Who 1, 2, 3, 4. No. 5. So therefore we've how many against? 2 against, 3 against, and no abstentions. Number 3, sewage discharges in the sea. Agree. 3 against.
Hold on. 4.
Oh, 4.
What did Simon do there? You went like that side.
No, Mary said against, and I was about to indicate. Then Graham, speedy Graham over there decided against.
Have we got 4 for agree? Yes.
Yeah.
Against? 1, 2, 3. Abstain 1. Okay. Wow. So I'd like to go back to what we were talking about at the beginning because we're not very clear on the decision for which two? Oh yeah, for the EDCL, for the culture and literacy engagement in deprived areas. What was our response for that?
I think you said it was a good topic to go with, and that sort of propped it along with. That culture and literacy one, I think, could be a big piece of work. But if they start to progress their way through it significantly, there's nothing to stop any panel coming back and saying, in November, and saying, we're happy with our work programme. Actually, we're going to ahead of schedule. We'd like to add this one. I think we do that. If we're going to bash them for not coming up with something detailed, we need to be thorough in the way that we do it to say, we need to hold an interim meeting, and I'm saying autumn, October, beginning of November maybe, something like that.
So we want them to add more to the bones of this, really, and come back in autumn.
We can agree in principle.
Yeah, in principle agreed. Sorry, Graham. Gerald.
So it looks as if the EDCL stuff and the housing and social care thing, we want more information. I wouldn't want to wait till October or the autumn because that means they can't get on and do anything.
True.
So it's only those two that we would want to come back. Interestingly, it's the two where the chairs aren't here. I would see if we could get a meeting in quite quickly to see, because we don't want to hold them up from doing some work, because effectively, if we're saying to them, no, you need to tell us a bit more, but you can't get on with it beforehand, saying to them to wait till October is not great. So I'm sure people could schedule in another meeting.
Or in fact, is this something we could do online?
Well, that was my suggestion, but Simon thought not.
I didn't say that. This is a public meeting, and therefore it has to be a recordable decision. What we can't do is publicly agree the work programme for the other committees, not agree it for EDCL and the housing one, and just let them crack on with it. We have to be seen to do that. Now, if we want to do it as an online meeting, and I'm not the greatest fan of that sort of thing, at least it will be a public meeting with recordable minutes at the end of it, which is where we need to be with regards to it. So I don't mind if we're doing them online, which means it isn't going to be live streamed, or is it? I really don't know how these things work these days, or whether we have to come back down into this room in, well, it would be a minimum of 3 weeks, possibly a month, I would suggest, because they're going to have a meeting, and then we're going to have 10 working days where we have to give them notice of the meeting. So we're looking at about a month's time. I'm not really bothered. All I'm saying is that we cannot informally agree to this. It has to be a recordable decision.
So in which case, let's do a meeting in a month's time.
Graham? Oh.
So, yep, we can schedule another meeting of SNP, obviously allowing enough time for the panels to come back and get the information SNP wants to make the meeting worthwhile. In terms of online meetings, we can do online meetings, but we cannot make decisions online, so this would probably constitute a decision because we're agreeing our work programme, so that would have to be in person.
Yeah, happy to have an online, in-person meeting as soon as possible. As soon as possible.
The only reason I was suggesting online was that maybe everybody would actually attend.
And that's logical. We've learned over COVID that you could do things quite effectively online, but unfortunately that doesn't work for previous government.
Anyway, are we clear on what we're doing about MDPCC commercial properties as well? What did we say? We're okay with that one?
Yes, I think that was one of those. I think they needed to flesh it out because that's going to grow.
The issue that was raised is economic development, culture, and leisure. Actually, quite a lot of the property stuff doesn't fall within that, because it's lakeside is and things like that. The port are money making ventures, but actually it's got to be looked at somewhere. So it might as well be looked at here as because it's actually quite a useful topic. Yep.
So are we agreed to go ahead with that one? I mean, a bit more flesh would be good, but in principle, go for it. Yeah. Okay. Graham.
Just a quick reminder that it is possible for Scrutiny Management Panel to consider issues that are corporate-wide and don't fit easily within a particular brief within the committee. So you can do that as well. And we have done that last year. Just a reminder.
In which case, would it sit better here? Because it does cross, and the stuff in housing is particularly important in terms of shops. The only thing is that I did ask them to remove from the terms of reference was talking about mismanagement, because I thought that prejudged the outcome, and you want to go into it with a neutral view if you can, and I think that people were happy to do that. So, but I again, I'm new to scrutiny, so Graham's knowledge is greater than mine, and it might be better to sit here.
Graham, thoughts?
Don't know, do people want to do it?
Simon?
Yeah, I'm happy to pick up on it. We're going to need to set the terms of reference of it, and we're going to probably have to agree our own work stream at the next scrutiny management meeting, because we have to follow the same protocol as everybody else so that we all know. But if it's a cross-cutting one, yes, it can easily sit with scrutiny management.
Agreed? No objections? Do you have something to say?
So just to be clear, in principle, if we put this back to the EDCL panel, perhaps if they scope it up a bit more, and when we come back to our next SNP meeting, if it looks like the scope is something that's cross-cutting, it could be something the Scrutiny Management Panel could look at, or if it's something that's full square within the remit of the particular panel, the panel could look at.
And Chair, and of course that then leaves us the option that if what they come up with is so limited that actually a wider look might be useful across the whole council, then that's an option that's available to us if we so chose.
Have we got anything left to do? Please tell me we don't. Brilliant. Thanks for your work today. We've noted everything that's been put in front of us. We've made decisions on everything that we've had to make decisions on. I call this meeting to an end. Thank you, folks.